Welcome to session 6 of the life group curriculum we're calling Limitless, Elijah's Stories. And one of the undergirding themes of this study is when we use the word limitless, we're asking the question, really, where do you limit God in your thinking? I can tell you two things that come to me very easily when I limit God. One is the times when I don't trust Him. How can I have followed the Lord for as long as I've followed the Lord, and there still be times in my life when I don't trust Him? And the second part is like that. How come, even though He's come through for me many times, how come I still doubt Him? How come every time there's a new challenge, I'm tempted to think that He's not going to be there, even though He has been there many times? And I see that process operating in this session, which we're calling Sweat and Miracles. And so as we go forward, think about, I hope you've been thinking about the times when you limit God in your mind, when you think He's not capable, not willing, not able. And so let's get into this story for this session. We're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 4. The Shunammite woman, who many have heard of, we don't know her name, but we know that she loves Elijah. She recognizes him as the man of God. And so she makes a special room, a guest room for him at her house. So in 2 Kings 4:8, one day Elijah was traveling through Shunem, where a rich woman lived. She had invited him to eat with her. So whenever he was in the area, he stopped in to eat. She told her husband, "I know he's a holy man of God, and he regularly travels past our house. Let's make a small room on the roof and put a bed, table, and chair and lampstand there for him. He can stay there whenever he comes to visit us." Now, the roof, don't think the roof is hiding someone in the basement. The roof was the prime position in a person's house. So this is a place of honor. And we learn about this woman that she's unable to have children and her husband is older. So to bless her, Elisha gives her a miracle. She promises that God will give her a child. And so she's pregnant, she has a baby, the son grows up, she loves him dearly, but then he falls ill and dies. Well, you can imagine how she feels. She's angry, she's disappointed, she's bitter. And so she sets off on a pretty long journey to find Elijah. 2 Kings 4:25. So she came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When he saw her coming at a distance, he told his servant Gehazi, "There is the woman from Shunem. Run to meet her and ask how she, her husband, and the boy are doing." Now look at what she said. "Everyone's fine," she answered. I don't think that's the way she said it. I think she said, "Oh, everyone's fine." She's bitter, she's angry. She does not understand what has happened. She does not understand what God has done through Elijah. She doesn't understand why her heart is broken. When she came to the man of God at the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi went to push her away, but the man of God said, "Leave her alone. She's bitter. The Lord has hidden the reason from me. He hasn't told me." The woman said, "I didn't ask you for a son. In fact, I said, don't raise my hopes." She doesn't even tell him the boy is dead. Her bitterness is about a promise fulfilled and then torn from her hands and her heart. She lashes out in frustration. That's why, one of the reasons we call this Sweat and Miracles is because it's a messy situation. It's full of anger and bitterness, but it's also full of perseverance and work and sweat. So Elijah sends the assistant ahead to try to revive the boy. No success. So Elijah arrives and through a very strange and difficult process, revives the boy. Now remember what we talked about before. We talked about, really, we introduced this life group series on Elijah this past summer when we did the series on miracles. And one of the things we talked about was a miracle as evidenced in the Bible is not just a snapping of fingers and poof, something appears in the distance. Something appears before us. It's not a magic act that God performs. Miracles are deeper. They're more full of love. They're more full of work than that. And we learned it over and over this past summer, and we're learning it through Elijah. That often a miracle is a process. And sometimes it's a process that we don't understand. And this is the perfect example. When Elijah came to the house, the dead boy was lying on Elijah's bed. Did you read that? Did you get the irony there? The dead boy is lying on Elijah's bed. He went into the room, closed the door, and prayed to the Lord. Then he lay on the boy, putting his mouth on the boy's mouth, his eyes on the boy's eyes, his hands on the boy's hands. He then crouched over the boy's body, and it became warm. So something is happening, but not life yet. Elijah got up, walked across the room, and came back, and then got back on the bed and crouched over him. What are we seeing here? And why are we seeing it? How come it wasn't a matter of Elijah from a distance thinking real hard, be alive? How come it didn't work for his assistant to go? And why is he going through all of these histrionics that we don't get? We don't understand. He's lying on him as if to transfer his life. He's getting some read, but so he's pacing the floor. Then he's crouching in front. This is a miracle of work that we really don't understand. Elijah got up, walked across the room, and came back, and then got back on the bed and crouched over him. And this is really weird. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha called Gehazi and said, "Call the Shunem woman." He called her. When she came to him, he said, "Take your son." We have no idea. If you ask me why this happened the way it did, I have no idea. But I do know this. It echoes and reflects and emphasizes something we've already been studying, and that sometimes a miracle is a process. A miracle takes obedience on our part. It takes faith on our part. It takes our willingness to believe and do something that seems really strange to us. But the dead boy came back to life. The dead boy came back to life. It's a messy miracle. It's interesting. The Hebrew word for sneeze in that case is, remember your high school English onomatopoeia, when a word sounds like what it is? The Hebrew word for sneeze is atisha. Atisha. Look it up. And what it means is that the life wasn't coming from Elijah into the boy. The life was the life that God birthed within the boy, coming out of the boy, exploding out of the boy in a sneeze. That's one reason he sneezes 7 times. 7 is often the number for perfection or completeness or godness. So the life didn't come from Elijah. The life was in the boy, and Elijah's act of obedience rekindled it, and it exploded back into being. It's a messy miracle. This is a God, what on earth are you doing miracle. Has that happened to you? We oftentimes don't understand the why. I wonder why I keep asking why, which is ironic in its own self. We're told about this story. We're never told why. We never told why God would give this woman a miracle baby and then allow him to die. We don't know why. We don't know why the servant wasn't able to raise the boy. We don't know why Elijah had such a struggle. We're not given that information. But isn't that just like following God now? Sometimes, oftentimes, We get an order, we get our marching order, we know what obedience is, we know what the word says, and we don't know why. And sometimes we never find out why, but we obey. I remember this past summer when we were doing the miracle series, one of the things I asked for when I had the opportunity was I asked for people who had asked God for a miracle, and he had not come through for them in the way that they had hoped. And there was no explanation of why. But it was really neat to see these people come forward and essentially say, Lord, even if I never find out why, I'll trust you. Even if I cannot explain what you're doing when you're doing it, I will trust you. Even when it seems really weird and no one gets what I'm thinking, believing, or doing, I'll trust you. Sometimes obeying is the best, no matter what's happening. In fact, all the time, obeying is the best, no matter what's happening. But here's a critical point from this story, and it's a question. And it's a question begged by the idea that sometimes a miracle is a process. What if, at any point in the story, someone had given up? What if the mother had said, "C'est la vie, the boy's gone, I have to live with it," instead of going miles and miles to Elijah? What if Elijah hadn't responded the way he did? What if he said, "Look, I don't have any control over life or death, you're just going to have to grieve and get over it"? What if Elijah hadn't made the journey? What if Elijah stopped the first time he was prostrate on the boy and said, "Well, sorry, I can't help you this time"? What if he had stopped at any point along the way before that first sneeze? There's a lesson in that for us. There's a lesson in that for me. There's a lesson in that for you. There's something the Lord loves about not giving up. I want to close this session by moving into the New Testament and just reminding you of a couple of things that the Lord said in case you are in the middle of something and don't know if you have the hope to see it through. I'm in Luke 11:9. Jesus says, "So I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you." And the verb tense in those verbs is seek and keep seeking, knock and keep knocking. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. And then if you flip forward a few chapters in Luke, there's an odd story in Luke chapter 18, but I think it's very telling and fits with this Elijah story from today. Luke 18:1, Jesus used this illustration with his disciples to show them that they need to pray all the time and never give up. He said, "In a city there was a judge who didn't fear God or respect people. In that city there was also a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Give me justice.' For a while the judge refused to do anything, but then he thought, this widow really annoys me." Now, wait a minute. This is Jesus telling this story. Remember, this is Jesus writing a story to illustrate to people why they should not give up. He could have easily pointed back to the Elijah story and the miracle with the sweat and the crouching and the pacing. He could have easily pointed back to that. He's talking about a judge. There's a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Give me peace." For a while, the judge refused to do anything, but then he thought, this widow really annoys me. Although I don't fear God or respect people, I'll have to give her justice. Otherwise, she'll keep coming to me until she wears me out. The Lord added, "Pay attention to what the dishonest judge thought. Won't God give his chosen people justice when they cry out to him for help day and night? Is he slow to help them? I can guarantee that he will give them justice quickly. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith in the earth?" Isn't that a strange way to end that story? It's as if the moral of the story isn't be like the widow. The moral of the story is, do you have that kind of faith that will persist? Do you have that widow's faith to go back time and time again, persevere, No matter what you see, no matter what your circumstances say, no matter what the miracle looks like in process, will he find that kind of faith in the earth? Will he find that kind of faith in me and in you? Pray and don't stop praying. Worship and don't stop worshiping. Love and don't stop loving. Never be afraid of a little sweat when God's at work in your life. Amen.